You've worked on roughly how many campaigns?
10, 12, but this is a whole new world. I mean, this is like nothing that you've ever seen before.
You've been working in Trump Tower now for a couple weeks?
Couple weeks.
How many people work here approximately?
100.
100. So down the street in Brooklyn, there's like 1,000, right?
Right. But very democratic of them.
More people, not necessarily better?
This is a much more efficient, effective campaign. The momentum's with us. And you go into the fourth quarter of a game or the last few weeks of a campaign, you want to have the wind at your back. I'm a Patriots fan. I mean, it might be here in New York. We know how to win in the fourth quarter.
Deflate the football.
No. This is a very close race. A good ground game's worth 3 to 5 points. You're going to see the best ground game that any party's put on in the Republican side this time. And I think you're going to see that ground game propel us to victory.
All right. We're ending with word association, my favorite. Ready?
Okay.
Word association, one word.
Yep.
Mike Pence.
Strong.
Kellyanne Conway.
Impressive.
Reince Priebus.
Awesome.
Donald Trump.
Strong.
Hillary Clinton.
Same.
Dude, you're supposed to say crooked. All right. The more things change, the more they stay the same. 8 years ago, I'm asking Sean Spicer annoying, gimmicky questions, and he's explaining that his campaign's going to win, even though they've got a smaller operation, smaller ground game, because they've got momentum. Sean, congratulations. You're 2 for 3.
Well, I didn't comment on the middle one.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is the morning meeting, and we're going to run through the day and then talk about it and then get your questions in. If you'd like to be part of the conversation here, if you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand, and we'll get to as many of you as we can today. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for joining us. This program is unusual compared to a lot of political discussion. We believe in the presumption of grace and the ethos of peace, love, and understanding. So as we go through the program, if you want to engage in the chat, feel free. But if you do, don't write garbage. And I say garbage because it's a very au courant word. As far as we know, there are no public events today from any major political figures. There is a great North Carolina and Kansas men's basketball team at 7 Eastern. But between now and then, Donald Trump down, not doing any public events, although I predict he'll do something today. My spidey sense says he'll do an interview, a press conference, or make some personnel announcements. So stand by for that. Fittingly, Joe Biden goes to Delaware today. If it's Friday, it's time to go on vacation. And Kamala Harris, fittingly, no public events. All right. Big news of the day that we're going to discuss from yesterday, but it has implications going forward, is the appointment of Susie Wiles, someone who Sean and I don't know. Dan, my guess is you don't know Susie.
I actually do know her because I hired Ballard Partners as one of my lobbyists, and Susie did a pit stop over there.
All right. Well, you'll talk about her in a second. I found that clip of me and Sean on the circus from season 1 of The Circus when I was looking for a clip of Susie. And I think for most of you don't know her and don't know that she came up through politics as an organizer and an organized person. And so I want to show you a clip from The Circus of Susie talking to her team. This is in the 2016 campaign when she was running Florida. And I think what I like about the clip is you'll get to know her. A lot of the traits that has allowed her to rise up to become the first woman White House chief of staff and a powerful figure in the Republican Party are on offer in this clip. Go ahead and roll it, please.
It's a battleground part of a battleground state. It has been for several presidential cycles because it's got everything. You got big cities, you got African Americans, you got Hispanics, you got suburban, you got rural. This corridor is as important a political piece of territory that exists in the United States when you're talking about who's going to win the White House.
Okay, let's go. Our every thought on a rally is how do we convert those people and keep them excited. That's all we should be thinking about at this stage of the game.
We've got to get them plugged in and make them real volunteers on the ground.
Can I ask you some questions?
Yeah.
Your candidate can't win 270 electoral votes without this state. So does that put pressure on you all?
Yeah.
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 That's
well, we're here. The Army of Trump is a real thing in Florida, and our job is just to harness it.
You'd think in a state this big, so-called ground game doesn't really matter. The fact is, it does matter. So where are we at with volunteers with human contact? Whether it's over the phone, by email, face-to-face, it makes a big difference. And this state can be decided by hundreds of votes.
Are you a registered voter?
Thank you very much, sir. Have a very positive day.
You are Pat Summerall's daughter.
Yes.
How is trying to win Florida like being a football game?
I would say the fourth quarter is really, really important.
We're clearly in the fourth quarter now.
Yes, we are.
There's no ambiguity. One team has as their player someone who has been in fourth quarters before, has been around football her whole life. Your star player has never done this in his life. Doesn't that give her an advantage?
No, because my star player has raw talent.
Sean, what do you see there in Susie that people should know? What it's illustrated about how she works and why she's been able to rise like this?
So Susie is no nonsense, no drama, organized, focused, and driven. Like, she is intense, but she does it with a very nice touch, right? She knows how to treat people as a boss, that brings out the best in people. And I think that's why, she knows how to read a room. I think part of the reason that she has stayed in Trump world at the level that has for as long as she has is because she knows how to manage personalities. And there's probably no group of personalities that is greater than Trump world, right? And so the number of people that are trying to knife you at any given time, Trump himself, the various levels of influential people around him. And she's been able to do that because she is a good manager at heart. And actually, I think that's why she'll be a good chief of staff. I will just say as a note before I forget, I thought Politico nailed it when they wrote, "Florida woman takes job as White House chief of staff." That's their headline.
That's their little joke about Florida man, Florida woman. Just at the risk of having you repeat yourself, she's been, as the New York Times pointed out, her appointment was cheered by Jeb Bush and Charlie Kirk. How is it that the establishment likes her and MAGA likes her?
Because I go back to the balance. Like, she treats everybody with respect. She doesn't dismiss everyone. There are people in all orbits, to be blunt, but even in Trump world where there's, she knows how to, she was responsive, right? So whether it's Charlie Kirk or, other people that are in the MAGA influencer world that she listens to, she treats them with respect. And obviously she's earned the respect of a lot of folks, in particular in Florida, Jeb Bush, Rick Scott. I think despite some of the chilly nature that maybe even exists in DeSantis world, I think they still respect her as an operative. And as Dan said, she was the kind of people that when Brian Ballard and others looking to bring her on board recognized the sphere of influence that she has. It was telling the other night when she got called up. I was there in 2016 when that version of that happened, and the idea that the president of the United States is putting you on the spotlight, giving you credit, and you demur, really says a lot about who she is and how she operates. Like, she is not out there to seek credit. She gets things done, and I think that's, again, people see that. There's a lot of people in politics and in DC that are all about trying to worry about their name and then worry about what they've done to achieve. She is an operative at heart. Yeah.
Dan, tell us about your experience with Susie.
Yeah, as I say, I worked with her just a little bit, and won't get into what we did together. But I think one of the things that is most telling is, but for maybe Casey and Ron DeSantis, she not only has the respect and admiration of the candidates she's worked for, the staff are so loyal to her, and people who worked against her speak incredibly highly of her. So her relationships are so broad, and everyone says the same thing. Respect, she's professional. I'd like to think politics is full of professional people. There are a lot of unprofessional people because it's such a finite time. You have the election and then campaigns kind of dissolve. Even if you're going to stand for re-election, they kind of, downshift to a very low gear. And then as they get ready, they'll ramp back up and bring people back on. So you get a lot of characters that come in and out. But the fact that, both kind of above, below, and sideways, people all say the same thing. it speaks to her character that she's able to have such a great reputation. And that made for a valuable and very successful lobbyist.
Yeah. She's the opposite of a day trader. She doesn't treat people badly on the assumption that, well, I'm only dealing with them once, or, you know, maybe I won't deal with them for a while, so I can treat them badly. She just doesn't do that.
Yep.
It's why people like her and respect her. Her staff, as you said, is fiercely loyal to her. I'll tell you one question I have, and I don't know anybody who doesn't think this was a great choice and really the best choice and really the only choice. There's three roles that some chiefs of staff do. I've been a student since I've covered the White House of the different ways people do the job. And James Baker is kind of the paradigm for a lot of people. He did the whole thing. There are three parts of the job that some chiefs of staff do that I don't know that Susie will do them or want to do them. And many chiefs of staff have passed on these. One is a public face, right? Going on Sunday shows, going to the briefing room, done judiciously. You look at Ron Klain, he was maybe a little more than judicious, but you go out when you need a big hammer, you need to make a point, you know, there's a crisis or there's some fight and you really want to set an example. It's possible Susie will do that, but as Sean said the other night, she passed up the chance to say something. So that's one role. Another role is national security, and how big a role. She'll clearly have to play a role in national security, but there's a management role, which is the main thing the chief of staff does. But will Susie weigh in with the president and say, you know, yes, bomb Iran, or, you know, whatever? Again, I just don't know that she will. I'm not saying she won't, but that's one. And then the last is congressional relations. I'm sure she'll play a big role in congressional relations, but there are some chiefs of staff who are chief lobbyists when that's needed. And although Susie has been a lobbyist, I'm just not sure that she will play that role as often as Rahm Emanuel did, say. Again, none of these are criticisms. I'm wondering how much of those three things she's going to do. The last thing is, as we sort of alluded to, although there were other names sort of bandied about, I don't recall such universal acclaim on both sides of the aisle for a pick like this. You know, maybe Leon Panetta. I don't remember specifically how that was received, but just in the abstract, I think that might have been well received because he had the same sort of broad and deep relationships. But Sean, what does this say to you about how the White House will operate and about the subsequent picks he'll make for senior jobs, if anything?
Well, I think you saw that quote that the clown car isn't, you know, going to be allowed in. And I think most people know what that means. And I have a feeling more than anything, that's going to be keeping the right people in the right jobs, moving the ball forward. So I think this is good just because the thing is with Trump is she's been with him at the most senior level for 2 years. So she's not coming in trying to figure out a management style and saying, okay, this is how she gets it. And that's where she's leaps and bounds ahead of anybody that's had the job, is that they've got a rapport. He knows her, she knows him. Like, to your point about the Sunday show stuff, she's not going to get pushed out there and say, go to the podium, which Trump did. I mean, I was plenty of times he'd be, Joe, go out there and just say from the podium, or Bob, whoever, or Sally. And he knows that's not her thing. So he's not going to do that. That takes some pressure off of her as well. I think more than anything, she knows who the right people are to bring in. So if a matter of national security comes in, I think it's going to be okay, here are the 5 people that we need to get together, right? That's the key part of this is it's not about knowing everything. It's knowing who knows everything, right? On a particular subject, getting those people in. And that's where I think she's going to excel. She knows when to put her foot on the gas and when to pull it off. And, for all the time honored phrase about letting Trump be Trump, she knows when to say, okay, I got to let him go do what he wants to do, or I know what battles to fight. And I think, again, that's where a lot of people cash in currency with Trump, getting to know him. They're like, I told him this and I told him that. And I'm like, cha-ching, you're going down. And by the time they get to figure him out, you've lost half your currency. She starts well ahead of anybody else in terms of understanding him as an individual.
Yeah. Very well said. So there's some indication that quick decision, right, that came pretty fast, might mean that we're going to see other decisions fast. Because, again, even though Donald Trump's superstitious, didn't want to have super long and deep discussions, there's been a lot of personnel work going on for months around the president. And If he were forced to pick, he likes central casting decisions. He likes to take his time. He loves, as we saw 8 years ago, he loves the drama. He loves, remember what he used Bedminster as kind of like a sound stage, right? So he loves that. But I also think I have some indication, I'm not saying everybody in Mar-a-Lago thinks this, that he's serious this time, has been widely discussed. He's been president before. He understands it. And if you know who you're going to pick and you can get him up and running, get the FBI background checks going, get the personnel decisions out of the way, who the deputy secretary is going to be, the assistant secretaries. If you can do that in November rather than December and January, you're ahead of the game and you don't squander some of the 100 days. So don't be surprised if this moves fast. And I'll say, I'm not predicting it. I don't have it hard enough to report, but I think that Senator Haggerty will be Secretary of State. That's what I think. Not
Mark,
reporting that he's going to be, but go ahead.
Yeah, my perception of her is that she is incredibly thorough, strategic, and likes to put a process together. And he trusts her because not only was she with him for the previous 2 campaigns, but at his lowest point after January 6th, she helped guide him out of the abyss and then steadily climb up the mountain. And given that she is so strategic, thoughtful, and likes a process, and he trusts her to keep your eye on the ball. This is the goal. I will help you get from here to there. And there might be a little zigzagging. But to your point, as a chief of staff, like, okay, we need to stand this up. What do we want to do the first year? Because I doubt she's staying for 4 years. So if she can channel all of that energy, channel him to keep his eye on the ball and agree to and embrace a process, he'll be much more successful getting out of the gate.
I agree with all that, except I predict she might be the longest serving chief of staff in American history. Sean.
Okay.
That could be true. I will tell you this. I'm not going to share any discussions that I've had with respect to personnel, but I will tell you that it's no secret that Bill ran personnel during the last transition. He's known Trump well. He knows the process well, right? And so when it comes to in 2016, I will say I watched a lot of people own their destiny. They basically realized, okay, if I want this, here's how I can make it happen. And Bill knows that probably better than anybody.
Which Bill are you talking about?
Haggerty.
Oh. Okay.
And I think that you're going to see, you mentioned the FBI background checks again. I would just say this. There have been a lot of traditional processes that have been followed in transitions. I would be very careful about people believing that certain things are going to be followed on a lot of fronts.
Yeah.
But I will say that you are right in that there's a lot of decisions that are going to probably start coming out, not just at the high levels, but at the Schedule C level.
Yeah. And again, I just don't see any rational reason not to do it except for indecision and love of pageantry. But imagine not just as the symbolism of it, but the substance, to have all your cabinet secretaries lined up by Thanksgiving rather than dragging it into December. Let them start haggling over who they get to hire beneath them in their departments. Get the White House staff up to speed. It's just a huge advantage. And it also keeps Democrats from getting back in the news because the press is just obsessed with personnel announcements. Yeah. So again, I'm predicting it will go faster than some people think. I'll be curious to see just how fast it goes. Speaking of the Democrats, so there's a few voices who are talking about what the party should do. But mostly, if you look at blue media and you look at elected officials, it's still mostly denial about what happened and why. There's 2 big strands. One is it was the economy, it was COVID and inflation, and there was no way she could win. I think I said that on two-way, either here or on the evening show. I think that's ridiculous. If there was no way she could win, she shouldn't have run. But then the other strand is and Al Sharpton is pushing this, amongst others, she was told to talk more about the economy, but people in the campaign stopped her from doing it. Again, the buck stops with the candidate. But there's also a strand that says, it's all the cultural issues. It's all about, Latinx and trans, et cetera. I want to show you a few things that people on the left are saying about why she lost. Show you a few things. All right. Heather Cox Richardson. She is the Rachel Maddow of Substack. 104, please. So here's a sentence. Here's the thing Heather Cox Richardson writes. Trump won the election in part by promising everything to everyone, but the actual policies of the MAGA party are unpopular, even with many Republican voters. All right, so closing the border, not unpopular with Republican voters, and not really just popular with MAGA. More energy production, ending the forever wars. That seems to me to be extremely clueless. I say with all due respect. All right, 105, please. This is Frank Bruni, who styles his column today as we Democrats really need to, we need to face reality. We need to not be in denial. Sure, Democrats had an expertly choreographed convention. Yes, Harris had a great debate, no doubt. Trump had a miserable one. And then came his Madison Square Garden debacle. Now, the Trump campaign said immediately after the debate, yes, Trump was baited into responding, but she had a horrible debate, and our data shows it because she didn't talk about what she believed in, and she missed the opportunity, and Trump didn't give her another debate. As for the Madison Square debacle, there were some bad jokes. There were some bad jokes and some crude statements, but anyone who covered it fairly saw it was a triumph for energizing the base and for reaching voters across the country, including some groups that Donald Trump did very well in. Two more quotes. 103, The Atlantic. This one, these all make me laugh, but I find them all illustrative. Atlantic magazine. Okay. There's this notion of there's a lot of tension between the Biden team and the Harris team. Was it Biden's fault? Was it Harris' fault? Biden, I say, would never have let such attack stand. This is about the trans ad that went unresponded to by the Harris campaign. He would have clearly rejected the idea of trans women competing in women's sports. Of course, he never staked out that position in his presidency. I find that funny, but the reporter could actually write 3 sentences like that. So he's being spun by the Biden people saying, well, Biden never would have stood by while he was attacked for the trans position. But of course, when he was president and all this was going on, he did nothing about it. Hilarious to me. Last one, or did we do them all? Last one, Nellie Bowles. And this to me goes to illustrate my argument that the political Achilles heel of Kamala Harris is she does not like to make difficult decisions under pressure, which is the job description of both presidential candidate and president. She was so scared of upsetting her left flank that she refused to endorse Prop 36, a new tough on crime bill in California that passed with over 70% of the vote in California. Every single county in California passed the tough on crime bill that Kamala Harris refused to endorse. She was asked about it repeatedly. She was asked about it right before the election because she'd already voted, so she decided her position, and she still wouldn't say. Incredible. So, Dan, what is the status today, 3 days after the election, of the Democratic Party? Leave the media aside for a minute. Of the Democratic Party grappling with identifying the actual causes of the problem.
Yeah, and I'll just also add, not only did that proposition pass, the mayor of San Francisco went down, which is getting some play on the left, especially here in New York, where people are worried about Hochul and other things. I think the reaction I'm going to put into 2 classes. The professional class, whose job it is to win elections, both the consultants and members of Congress from swing states, swing districts, I think is pretty sober. You're starting to see not just Richie Torres, but Debbie Dingell is speaking out. The Times profiles the woman from Washington who won, despite Trump winning her district for the 3rd time and increasing margins, are beginning to speak out, kind of confidently, not fearful of the left, and saying, here are all the lessons from my district, from my state, things that we're getting wrong. Debbie Dingell saying, and people who, Mark, have heard her on your platform the last year, it's not new, saying like there was nothing shocking about what happened. Like you could see the writing on the wall when I talked to people. So I think the professional class is beginning to go public. They're sober, and they see it's not just the economy, not just cultural issues. Like it's a much, much bigger holistic set of problems. The armchair generals who sit in New York City and Washington, D.C. and never get out of their neighborhoods are continuing to say it's not us, it's you, it's them, it's all these other reasons. And as you say, the patronizing kind of people don't realize that Trump's bad for them. They're going to see once he enacts his policies how much he's screwing them, and they will ultimately come back to us because we're right. And I think they'll be the last to get it because it's just too painful. But I think that, one of the things that I'm watching is not just the DNC chair race, but the DSCC, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and the DCCC will get new chairs. And I'm reminded of 2006 when Chuck Schumer, who then was kind of an up-and-comer and not known, too well outside the Beltway in New York City, took over the DSCC. And one of the first signs of change was he got involved in primaries, and Bob Casey, who was pro-life and from Scranton, or lukewarm pro-choice, was running against Kate Michelman, the NARAL president, in a Pennsylvania primary. And Chuck Schumer said, we are all in for Bob Casey because he represents that state better and he's going to win. In Virginia, Jim Webb against Harris Miller. Jim Webb from Southwestern Virginia, an Iraq vet. He was against the war. He was against a lot of free trade policies. And Chuck Schumer said, he represents Virginia and he can win. We're going all in. Sherrod Brown, believe it or not, was considered controversial because he was anti-trade, he was anti-war, and people thought there's no way we can win Ohio with that. Rahm Emanuel got chosen to be the DCCC chair, and he went toe-to-toe with a lot of constituencies in the party, including firing staff that he thought was not helping them win. So we're going to get some tells about whether the professional class that views all these problems, they're going to put their money where their mouth is, because the left's going to jump up and down and say, you can't do this. And we're going to see what Hakeem Jeffries thinks. We're going to see if Chuck Schumer still feels the same way, 20 years later. So I think the party's going through this. It's normal. It's natural. This is what happens when you lose. But I'm also, the Axios and others are not saying anymore, this is shocking and horrifying, we can't believe it. And they're starting to say the signs were there.
One thing that's interesting to me, if Donald Trump had just won the Electoral College and squeaked by with 280, whatever. But when you start to look at, and again, I subscribe to the Halperin, not just the newsletter, but the viewpoint on exit polls. So I take it with a grain of salt. But when you look at the data that shows, Harris did worse with women, Harris did worse with Latinos, she did worse with blacks. Like that's their campaign was all about women, right? I mean, that's the one thing that if you did well with any group, that should have been it. At some point you have to, and you had over $1 billion. You outspent this guy by a massive amount. Going back to the interview before, right? We had the same argument logistically and mechanically in 2016. But if you're the Democratic Party, to Dan's point, at some point you have to say, what is it that we're saying? Because the groups that are naturally with us walked from us. So was it her? Was it the message? Or was it to some degree what Donald Trump is actually saying? Because you can call him all the names in your world, but if he's getting an increasing share of the vote, it's not working.
Well, I think, Sean, what you're seeing now is people are looking back. Again, I'm going to say really primarily the professional class, whose jobs it is, including members of Congress, to win elections, and saying, my God, the signs were there in 2020 about Latinos leaving the party and kind of the working, multi-racial working class upset about how we handled George Floyd and policing and other things. My God, in 2022, yes, Roe was shocking, but it masked a lot of other issues, if you look at exit polling, that we were getting trounced on, and that the wrong messages were taken, and we were fighting the last election and not the next, and that Trump's steady march was apparent for everyone to see, and now we need to, it's hit us right in the face. So I do think it's way more than just how we talk about it. It's what we focus on, how we view these issues, and we have to find candidates that reflect this, not just like in a lab, put out a one-pager and have a motion that, we're all for this now. Like, we need real people with real experience who have real passion, not a poll-tested, here's your talking points.
Do you guys think it's more an economic problem, a cultural problem, or it's both, and there's no reason to decide which is more?
It's both. I mean, I think there's no way that you can say, because each group, it may be a little more, a little less, and in 2 years, there probably will be something else that we're not talking about today. But I think, it starts with respect and not having every issue be we're right, you're wrong.
I think the thing that, as I've said on this platform, and we hear from people every day, they went too far, right? Everything had to go to, when you start calling someone Hitler, it doesn't, you've really gone way too in. Like, there's a lack of respect for the other side. And I'm not, look, I know people are going to be like, well, Donald Trump doesn't do this. Okay, guess what? We won. So if you're the other side, you have to sit back and say, did we push it too far on some of these issues, right? I think the issue on trans, right? The thing that's interesting for me is that as a guy that doesn't believe in big government, my view is you want to live I don't really care what you do in your life if it doesn't affect me. But when you start telling me that I'm going to get canceled because I'm not using your pronouns, and you're going to lose my job, and you kind of start to go too far. And I think that's the problem. When you call people racist, Hitler, Nazis, you do and undermine the belief, like as we see on this platform over and over again, people were saying, hey, I bought 10 items at the grocery store. I can't afford life anymore. And so I'm going with Trump. And it was like, well, then you're a racist. Then it's like, all right, well, I'm all in now.
All right, we're going to talk brief. Go ahead.
I go back to the only unifying thing has been anti-Trump. And on the economy, what Harris offered was like basically the modern version of school uniforms for 96. It was just small ball, poll tested, utterly safe space stuff. And if you asked anybody, if Kamala Harris wins, Sean, before we got on, Sean was playing, he asked his kids in the car ride, what is Donald Trump going to do on day one? And they were throwing out very adorable and cute, things, but like they all had an idea. Nobody knows what Harris wanted to do on day one and why she wanted to be president. And that is true up and down the party. Why do we want to be in charge to help you on the economy? We have no answer for that. And we haven't for years.
We could talk an hour about the media, and we're not going to. We're going to get to people's questions in a minute. We'll have a brief conversation about the media. If you'd like to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. I made a mistake in the newsletter. I identified CJ Craig's name as Claudia Jane. It's Claudia Jean. I deeply regret the error, and I deeply regret the 25 minutes I've had to spend answering emails from people telling me I got it wrong. So it seems to me that the press is even less soul-searching, at least in public, than the Democrats. There's two issues to me, two main issues. One is they covered the race as if Kamala Harris was going to win, and didn't cover the issues that would have at least let their readers understand, and their listeners and viewers, that Trump might win. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, the economy was so bad, how could she possibly have won? Well, that really wasn't the dominant way the coverage went. And then the other is not acknowledging their failure to be fair to Donald Trump. Again, he deserves tough scrutiny. He's done a lot of horrible things, but the imbalance of the coverage was ridiculous. So, Sean, do you see any green shoots of recognition on the part of the media of their failure?
No, and in fact, it was funny because today I was looking at the lineup for the Sunday show roundtables, and it was like, did you guys know there was an election on Tuesday and Donald Trump won? Meet the Press has no one from Team Trump. They in fact have their reporter that was horribly anti-Trump, Garrett Haake. I was like, did you guys forget what happened? And
they probably tried for Trump people.
No, that's not true. I mean, I doubt it. I'll be honest with you, because enough people.
They might not have.
Here's why I'll tell you this right now, just from experience. Enough people are going to want to audition, and they will go on any show, especially a Sunday show. So let's be honest with you. But I was like, it blew my mind how tone deaf a show like Meet the Press is. It just, the idea that there is no, they don't want to even try to understand who these people are, why they voted. So it's going to be the same analysis from the same people who gave us the same crap all for the last several months.
Dan.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any self-reflection yet. I think it may come because the rise of alternative media and their influence in politics is only going to rapidly accelerate. And so I think when you see more candidates at different levels of office blowing off the mainstream media because they're going to crave, some local podcaster or somebody that has a targeted audience, I think they will get to it. And I think from talking to one person, again, living in New York City, I think the corporate world, as they look at money and investments and other things, I think some of these companies are now looking at buying some of these podcasters and others and trying to bring them into the fold. And so it's going to happen whether the punditry class within their organization see it or not.
Yeah. I will say the funny thing, Mark, is I've talked to a couple transition folks in the last 24 hours who've shared with me stories of reporters who've called them like, almost the same transactional nature that a lot of people looking for jobs, like, hey, buddy, it's good to catch up. And they were like, you do know that we can see what you've written. Like, and I won't go through the names, but I will just tell you that it is not lost on a lot of these transition folks where they were in terms of how they reported on this campaign. So it is amazing that the stories have already started on.
Yeah. I'll give you a shoebox diorama simulation. Hey, congratulations. Yeah, amazing job you guys did. Hey, I'd love to come down and maybe get dinner with you and Susie. How's that sound? My editors really they're counting on me to get a lot of scoops out of the Trump White House. So I'd love to.
You know what? Actually, that's not that far off at all.
Oh no, that was real. That was real life. That wasn't a
no. The word scoop came up with a couple in particular that said they called and said, just would love to grab a couple scoops from you. And the general view among myself and some of these other folks has been like, oh, really? Is that all you want? It's just, yeah.
I didn't make my dialogue up, Sean.
No, I know. I think it's been recorded and ChatGPT is spitting it out through.
Oh my goodness. Erica, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell people what's on your mind, where you're from, who you supported for president, anything else you want to say. We're glad to have you here.
Sure. So I've become an addict. I am addicted to watching you guys. I was scolded by my husband last Friday night for having your show to my ear while my son's football team was warming up. I am in Rhode Island. I was a first-time Trump voter. I was a never Trumper who was converted.
What converted you?
So I have sort of two windows that I bring to this. One is my personal life as the mother of 3 teenage sons, and the other is my work in education advocacy. I work for an organization that launched 3 years ago, and we basically just look at primary sources in school districts around the country about what's happening in classrooms. And I was a teacher till 2015. So when I say you can't overstate how much extreme ideology and dogma came into the schools, I'm saying it as somebody that actually worked in schools and also has kids in school. The second thing that I would say is that the steady drumbeat of denigration of boys and men, that is another thing that cannot be overstated. And so when I look at the marriage gap in the voting, right? So the sort of the single women versus the married women who we can assume many of whom are mothers, I think that has driven a lot of people like me to say, I could never vote for that guy. And then in 8 years to say that the Democratic Party absolutely needs to lose power because what they are pushing on, the messaging, the denigration, the contempt, the disdain, and also I would say, as many probably know, the Democratic Party obsesses about disparities, and they always have reasons for those disparities, right? It's racism, it's sexism, it's something. But the disparities that we see between boys and their sisters and boys and their female classmates, they're not just massive, they're increasing. And not only does the Democratic Party and the media refuse to cover it, they actually celebrate those disparities. And I really do think that that a lot of people, myself included, have taken a stand to say, like, this cannot continue.
Erica, brilliant. Do you want to ask a question? I bet Sean and Dan both have questions for you, but is there something you want to ask, or you just want to share all that?
I guess I would like to ask both of you. First of all, I adore you guys. Dan, I tell people all the time, I wish I smiled as much as you. You have like a natural smiley face, and I wish I had that. I also wish I could run like you. I guess I would ask you guys to respond a little bit to what I'm saying. Like, I work for an organization where for 3.5 years, I've been writing and on television and being called horrific names. I'm a liar, I'm a Nazi, I'm a racist, I'm a homophobe, I'm all these horrible things. But what we saw coming, like a freight train, sort of was this outcome, because we hear from parents, so many parents in interracial marriages with biracial children whose kids were getting caught up in this race-based grouping in schools. but also across the political spectrum. And I guess I would ask you guys, it seems like the scales are falling from the eyes of some Democrats, that they're sort of admitting today, I was afraid to say that I have a problem with biological, males playing in girls' sports, and I didn't say it. Now I am. Do you think that we're going to see this dam break and a lot more Democrats who've been DMing and texting for years about their true feelings, but hiding them in public? Are they going to come out and admit that this really was an issue and that they need to recalibrate?
Dan.
Hope the answer is yes. The one group that is fairly quiet in this analysis or post-election analysis, but for Bernie Sanders, is the progressive wing. And I don't know if that's because they're trying to, they're going to wait, they're going to let the steam come out of the kettle, and then they're going to kind of put their hands back on the tiller and try to say, like, no, this is a really proudly progressive party and you're a racist, you're this, or whether there is some questioning. I don't know how you look at the data and reach a different conclusion. I just don't. And that's not to say that you want to throw transgender children out. Like, I think most people, I've said this before, don't see it as black and white. There's a lot of gray. And just as they respect the right of a person to make their choice, they don't want to be told how they should behave and what they should accept. So respect me, I'll respect you. So I hope that is where the party goes.
Sean.
First, I give hat tip to Dan for the nautical reference to the Rhode Island people. That was very nice. The hand on the tiller thing to the ocean state. That's nice. Where are you from in Rhode Island, if I may ask?
I live in Cumberland, so right on the Massachusetts line.
Listen, I don't need a geography lesson. You know what I'm talking about?
There's only like there's only like 8 towns in the whole state.
That's not very
39.
Oh yeah. What do you?
You have 39 towns and 36 school districts.
Yeah, there you go. That's Rhode Island right now.
And the best peppers on the calamari.
And not a single Republican in our delegation.
Yeah. It's amazing, but to your point, I think that there's been an overcorrection. I will say that in conversations, I don't think this is going to be a huge news thing, but the issue of DEI and trans among transition staff is definitely a priority. You're going to see not just, I know your question was to Dan on that side, but this is definitely something that is a priority. And the one thing that is interesting, I find the burning of the American flag abhorrent, but I've always believed that the beauty of the First Amendment is that as much as I hate people who do that and what they do, that's the beauty of our First Amendment, right? It gives us, and what Dan was saying is we've lost that sense of tolerance, which is, okay, I will respect your view, but you can't impose it on me, right? And I think that what has happened in a lot of these cultural issues is I have an issue and now you must believe in it. You must accept it. And we've lost that sense of, you just need to respect that I live differently versus now you have to abide by it. And that's where I think the pendulum is going to swing back.
Can I just add one other thing to your point? Because I know people are saying this in the chat, and I've heard this on X following up our shows. It's not just transgender rights. Like, another huge issue for a lot of people is public safety. In New York City, it's not as safe as it once was. That is a fact. I don't want to hear statistics and everything else. If you raise the concern about public safety and what's labeled small crime, the increase of it, people say, like, you're racist. Like, how dare you bring up, because let me show you the FBI statistic, and any solution you have that involves increasing policing or other things, like, we don't want to talk about. So it's not just transgender rights where the party shuts people down and says, and puts a label on them, but it's a lot of other issues that, depending on how you feel on transgender rights, bothers and concerns a lot of Americans.
Can I just say one thing, Mark, real quick, too? When you say transgender rights, what I would say is that it is not transgender rights that have people upset. It is exclusively about what is happening with children and what they are being taught in schools and the massive redefinition of sex that occurs in the Title IX rewrite, which I bet most people don't realize, right? So this is not about, adults. This is really about, and I would be happy to, share with people primary source materials from schools, but the content in the schools starting in very young grades is teaching children you choose if you want to be a boy or a girl or both or neither. That is the content. It is in the state standards in many states, and parents are freaking out.
Amen.
Erica, we have a million more questions to ask you, but we want to bring some other folks in. But so grateful to you for participating and just impressed by how eloquent you are about the whole thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I love your show.
Thank you. Come back regularly. Appreciate it. Tom, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, who you supported for president, and what's on your mind, please.
Sure. I'm in Florida and actually practiced medicine in Iowa for 35 years before I moved down here. And I voted for Trump 3 times. And I'm wanting to mention something that's a bit of a change of subject. I just was looking at a Wall Street Journal editorial, headline said, Latino voters supported Trump. And I would agree that that's a good way that's true. But I think Latino voters sort of is a poor description of who they are. They're not just Latino voters. They're Latino citizens. They're American citizens. Down here in Florida, a lot of the work done on our houses and cars and everything are done by Latinos, probably mostly Cubans, but Central Americans and Mexicans too. And I think that is something that is important for anyone who wants to run for office. Treat Latinos as not Latinos, but American citizens. They're great people. They do great work, and I appreciate them.
Thank you for that. Sean?
I think that, that was basically the Trump strategy. Go after different groups and say, you have this problem too. You care about inflation. You care about crime, safety, cultural issues in particular. And I think that the vote shows it, especially among the Hispanic community. You look at the share of the vote. It's really interesting. There's a school of thought that even among Republicans that, we need to pander to these groups. And Trump got the highest share of because of, I think he was blunt, direct, and to your point, treated them as, you're a citizen, you care about these issues as much as the next guy, and it reflects in the vote.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems people have is they treat all Latinos as the same. And I remember this from the Obama campaign when they talked about the difference of each Latino group, whether they originate from Colombia or Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic or Mexico, and where in these different areas. And then ultimately they're Americans. And Karl Rove talked about this in 2004, about how they met them where they are, talked to them about the issues they cared about. They didn't just stick a label on them and put them in one shoebox and say, it's a really simple message that all of you should rally around.
Tom, how'd you find Two-Way?
Oh, I've been watching it for several months. I don't really know.
Okay, that's a good
do
answer.
a little bit of channel searching and
yep. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for joining. We'd love to have you back. Come back regularly, please.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Steve, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, who you're supporting, who you supported for president, what's on your mind, please.
New York City, Manhattan, and I supported Trump. And yeah, I just wanted to get your reaction to something. You had someone on yesterday. I watched the close end of your show last night, Mark, and you had someone on and you asked him, I believe he's from California. You asked him what he was most, I don't remember what he said, excited, interested in for the Trump administration. His answer was, appropriately immigration. And that got me to thinking, and what I thought might be the most interesting to me, and I'm hoping maybe you guys can tell me how naive I am, is a word that he never uses, and that's reform, government reform. Other words could be, corruption, Bannon, from what I understand, spoke about deconstruction of the bureaucratic state. You think about what Elon's proposing to do, RFK Jr. proposing to do. It's all kind of in the same sort of vein. And if you think about what Trump could do that would have the most lasting impact, of course, there's expedient things, inflation, Americans are struggling. But in terms of lasting impact, if he was to reform the government, whether that is under the bureaucracy or term limits in the legislative branch, there's a tremendous opportunity to have a real lasting impact on the republic doing that. And I wonder if that's just naive from a political point of view, from a practical point of view, and or from a priorities to Trump point of view. And we'd love to get your reaction to that.
Dan.
So two things here. One, I wouldn't say that stuff like inflation and other things is not a lasting impact. I mean, I know that's not what you're saying, but for a lot of tens of millions of people, their lives, that is much more impactful on their lives than how the government runs, right? It's the whole idea of chaos in Washington versus calm in the country versus vice versa. But I'm from DC, I have family in DC that work in government, so I know where you're going with this. I think that, one, Trump can't enact term limits for members of Congress. That he cannot just unilaterally do. I think if he were to make changes to the bureaucracy, not all of the bureaucracy is great. There are some changes that are probably needed. And I think I don't think he's going to make massive change into like the overall trajectory of government. It's just too big. It's too hard. He only has 4 years. He's going to have, Congress to deal with on this. His own party has vested interest in some of those agencies performing and doing well and where money flows to, et cetera. But that, if he were to make change, then the country will, evaluate it. And if people don't like it, they'll get tossed out and someone will come in that does what they, something else.
John.
Here's what I'll tell you. I think government is very difficult bureaucratically to move or to do things. That being said, in the conversations that I'm having, I think you are going to see individuals go into a lot of places with very clear instructions to make change. Whether they will be successful or not is a separate discussion. But what you're addressing is a key tenet across all of the folks in the transition that I'm talking to. That the individuals that are chosen for key positions will not be there to sit at a desk and have a nice title. They are being told, this is what your mandate is. Are you clear on that, right? We want to go in, make this place more efficient, make it more effective for the American people and the taxpayers. And you're going to have to break some glass. Whether that's effective, Dan knows. I mean, there a lot of government is intentionally made to not move quickly. There's a reason it's called bureaucratic. And so there's two questions. One is he going to try? And then two is, what are those outcomes going to look like? I think that there's no question that in my conversations that I've had over the past 24, 48 hours, that is a key tenet of a lot of the personnel that's being chosen.
And by the way, I'll just add, because you hear Democrats talk about this a lot, that the bureaucracy should resist Trump. But when Democrats have the White House, and historically it's been like the DOD and other things have resisted Democratic presidents and driven Bill Clinton, Barack Obama totally nuts. We didn't like it. Like you serve the Constitution. That's who your oath is to. But right. The president should have people that support that are enacting the agenda of the cabinet and the president. They are on the ballot. If you don't like what they do, then you vote them out. That is democracy. That is not a threat to democracy. That is democracy in action. And I would hope that a Democratic president, because Al Gore and Bill Clinton, I forget, Mark, you will remember whatever the title was, Remaking Government. It was like Al Gore. Reinventing government. They tried to make all this change and some happened, and I think for the better, and some did not. But like, this is why we have elections.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because the Democrat counter narrative is that Trump's going to teeth out all the experts and put in loyalists who are anti-science and so forth. Now, there may be some credence in that. I'm not taking a position here on that, but to hear you say that, Dan, where, well, you actually can teeth people out and people in that you want, and that's what's done.
And Steve, who's to say our experts are better than they, like, okay, I may have, and look, I have a brother-in-law, if he doesn't get upset for me, who's a very senior person at NOAA, right? Went to Duke, double made masters in Duke in environmental science, believes he is in government for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
But his expertise, I think, is valuable and adds a service to the United States government and the people. But if somebody else comes in that might be from business or have a different background, who am I to say he's better than that guy, even though Trump just won, with a different way of potentially running it? And if they screw everything up, they'll get kicked out of office.
Did you guys see it was getting passed around on Twitter where there was a loop of all the threat to democracy from both the Democratic politicians and from the Democratic media, and they replaced democracy with bureaucracy? Did you see that? So
I haven't seen it yet. Actually,
a threat to bureaucracy and so forth. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I do buy into the fact that at a certain point, certainly bureaucracy becomes anti-democratic when there's a certain amount of power in that bureaucracy and they're not elected. You do have a problem. And I'd like to have a discussion with someone who does not think we're past that level now. So,
Steve, do you wear your "Make America Great Again" hat to Zabar's?
No, man. A couple weeks ago, a person, I can't remember if they were from Manhattan or somewhere like Manhattan, Santa Monica, I don't know. But they asked the question about, how, if Trump wins, how do I deal with my friends, my colleagues? And Dan, you spoke to that, I think, mostly, but that would be a helpful discussion to continue to have here, because I have friends who I don't know how to deal with. I mean, I'm not really outed in terms of a Trump supporter to people with TDS. Sorry to use that phrase, but discussion. There are a lot of people who call in here from places like Manhattan and are in my shoes. Discussion around how to navigate this with people, and it's been encouraging to see. As far as I'm aware, there haven't been significant protests and things like that. But it is hard for people to navigate. And maybe you guys could help in that regard.
Yeah, we will. Steve, thank you. Appreciate you coming. So in that regard, as we head towards the inauguration, we will be having those kind of discussions here. Eager to have as much civic accord as possible and as little violence, of course, as possible. We were talking yesterday off the show about the importance of turning from the discussion of how the Democratic Party is dealing this away from Dems in disarray, which is a journalistic trope that people use, to looking seriously at how the Democrats are trying to come up with ideas and leaders and strategies and tactics for being the opposition party for the next 2 years and thinking about the midterms, et cetera. So our tone for that hopefully will be more welcoming to Democrats. I didn't like the fact that we didn't have any Harris supporters on. I call on people at random for the most part, and we still would love our Harris supporters to be part of the conversation. Just want to hear from Brian real quick before we go. Brian, just update everybody on where we stand on the farm and what kind of stuff help you're getting and what kind of stuff you need now.
Did you catch anything this morning? I know you said on X you were going out to hunt for the show.
Yeah, so I did harvest my first of 3x3 tags this morning, but I was planning on shooting a doe to, because I can't afford beef jerkies, but I can afford an arrow, and that makes 70 pounds and a $30 dehydrator, and there's 70 pounds of venison jerky, which I prefer. So that was my plan, but so I was late. Obviously my hunting stuff's a little scattered, but it's okay. I still got out there, and walking back to my tree stand, it's private property everywhere, but a lot of it I can hunt. And I'm walking to my tree stand, and I'm like 30 yards into the woods, and there's my white whale. There's like, I got pictures of the big 10-point buck, the one with the bear, that one. Like, he's standing right there, and he doesn't see me because I got my new fancy camo pants on. Hey, and I smoked him. dropped him. Double lung, heart, boom. Hey, he didn't even know he was hit. That's why I don't hunt with guns. When you shoot a deer with a fast bow, with a super sharp, like you ever laid yourself open with a razor knife, you don't feel it. So the deer, it was a clean pass through. Hey, the deer goes like this. Like, what was that? Hey, then he just starts walking off. Hey, he's pumping out all of his blood. He doesn't even know it. Hey, the deer walks 20 yards. I can see him start to get woozy, and he just lays down. And I walked back up to the house. I made a cup of coffee, and then I called my buddy Hunter that because of the doe I could have dragged alone up to the Jeep and brought the hunters, but I called Hunter. I was like, Hunter, guess what? He's like, you got the big one. I was like, bro, I need your help. Bring the truck. He came up, his truck, the field's all dry. It hasn't rained in months. So we brought his truck all the way to the back. Me and him, antler, boom, back to his truck at the processor. Like I was like, because field dressing a 200-pound deer is a lot different than a 100-pound doe. You know, it's a bigger job. But we got it done. The deer's at the processor. The cool thing is Hunter's a part of this cool program in Massachusetts called Share the Harvest. So all that food is getting processed and donated to people in need. And this is the perfect allegory for why I'm done with the left, because I'm a bad hunter. But what they don't know is that buck, that giant buck that I shot back there a couple hours ago, was no longer reproducing. And all he was doing was killing the young deer, because that's all deer do during the rut. They kill and try to mate with does. And the old deer that are huge, that can't mate anymore, guess what? They get angry about it. And you know what they take it out on? The little deer. And it's a 10-point buck. I'm very excited. I've never shot a 10-point buck. But I watched that when that big deer moved in, I watched him kill two of my young does. Like I could watch it on video. They fight. And when a big deer fights a little deer, guess what happens? The big deer kills little deer.
Brian, tell people the URL for the farm so they can sign up for the newsletter and they can sign up to help.
I believe chapinroadfarm.com at the moment, but just because they have like 4 domains. It has something to do with the tech people, but you could go to chapinroadfarm.anything and you'll get there.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Remember the pheasant bow? This is why I hunt pheasants. Their feathers are very cool.
Brian,
but
thank
yeah,
you.
so I'm just psyched. I never
update.
shot a deer that big, so I'm just excited.
Thank you for the farm narrative. Everybody go to the website and sign up.
We had the first hole in one from the farm team, like someone on the team. It was the head of our and this is why we got to pick the next project. I want to go with Peanut, the squirrel. I think we should reunite him with the man. If anyone's familiar with that sweet squirrel, that should be the next project, because it was the head of our molecular plant biology, like geneticist. He happens to be my brother too, but he got his first hole in one the other day. Scotty Lee, he's welcome to the club.
Brian, thank you. Have a great weekend. Everybody sign up for the farm. We'll get more updates in the coming days. Guys, closing thoughts. Sean.
I can't beat that. I hope
we'll be clipping that and putting it on the social media.
Yeah, I would just say have a great weekend. I'm excited to sleep. I
may nap right after the show. Dan, what's going on with you this weekend?
What a week. And going to spend time with the family, and one of our kids just turned 11. So we are hosting a sleepover tonight, which means I will not be sleeping much tonight, unfortunately. But just looking forward to the conversation continuing. Onward we go.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'll be back at 6 p.m. tonight for the closing episode of the week of Two-Way tonight.
Hey, Mark, just real quick. I think, I don't want to get ahead of the team, but we should have a fun, like kind of a special show that the three of us have been working on that we'll have hopefully announced Monday or Tuesday next week. That's a little bit of a TV tease. But we've got some special ideas that I think people will enjoy. How's that?
Sean's right. Stay tuned for more of that. And again, many of you have been so generous in helping us build this platform and expressing your appreciation for past programming. So if you want to help Two-Way grow to other program areas and our political programming as well, go to our website, twoway.tv/contribute, and you can give any amount you wish. Thanks everybody for watching all week. Grateful to get through Election Day and beyond with you. And I'll see you tonight at 6, and the three of us will see you Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Because it is Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Dan, it's what time?
Time for the morning meeting.
There you go. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.